Welcome to ATCP in the Canopy, the official video podcast of the Association of Tree Care Professionals. I'm your host, Austin Lee, and our mission here is simple. We're seeking to elevate the standards of our industry by talking to the people who live and breathe tree care. Whether we're discussing the latest safety protocols, business operations, or just the future of the industry, we're here to help you climb higher in your professional journey. Joining me today is Brazzi Smith. Brazzi is the owner of Precision Tree Care and Removal in Live Oak, Florida, and leads the ATCP membership committee. Brazzi, thanks for climbing into the canopy with me today. How's it going?
Good. I'm happy to be here.
Has it been a good week so far? Is the weather kind of shaping up for you down there? I know it was a little bit cold in Florida for a hot minute.
Oh yeah, it's warming up and work is picking up, so we couldn't be happier. We don't mind working in a little bit of cool weather, but we're so used to it being hot, and it's a lot easier to work when wearing a t-shirt. So
Do you have a lot of seasonality down there with the volume of work that you guys get in the Florida market, or?
that's a good question. I'm in the North Florida area, so basically our service area is along I-10 corridor, right between I-10 and 75, basically where they intersect. It still gets pretty cold up here in the wintertime. The temperatures are more similar to maybe South Georgia. Last year in Pensacola, which is where I'm originally from, out in West Florida, they got 8 inches of snow. So it's kind of crazy. We didn't get snow over here in Live Oak, but it does get cold. So there is some seasonality to it. And like every other part of the country around the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's, it slows down some. Now that is a little bit dependent on what happened, prior in the busy time of the year in hurricane season, because for all of 2023 and all of 2024, we had been hit by Adelia and Debbie and Helene, and all within like 13, 14 months of each other. So we were just wide open all the way through winter, both of those years. A lot of it just depends on what's going on with our market and our area. In some ways that was good for us. In some ways it was exhausting, and just had to keep you guys trucking along even though everybody was wore out. But it pays off to work real hard when you can, because you gotta make hay when the sun's shining,
Absolutely.
because we had a winter like this winter in 2025 going into 2026, and it has slowed down. We did feel a pretty dramatic slowdown. We still worked and they were still steady. There's a big difference between this winter and last winter.
Nice. Have you always been in kind of that Pensacola area? Is that where you grew up, or did you move into the
Yeah,
area
so
later?
I was born in Texas, and then my family was just like, we're getting out of here. It's the desert. And they love Florida, so they love the beach. So we moved to Navarre, Florida, which is between Pensacola and Destin. That's where I grew up. I went to high school there. And then I met my wife. She's from the country. She's from Live Oak. That's when, after, several years of dating and getting to know each other in the area, and we got married. She lived with me for like 6 months in Navarre after we got married. And then she was like, this place is not my not my vibe. So I was like, all right, let's go back to the country. So we moved back to the country and I started a tree business.
Was the tree business always the plan, or how did that happen for you?
So, I came from a background of carpentry. That's what my father and I never had a W-2 job in my life. I always worked for my father, and I was a partner in a cabinet company. I kind of was getting tired of that anyways. And so when we decided to move to Live Oak, I was like, well, I've got to figure out something to do for work. And there's the idea of, well, maybe I could start, my own cabinet company over there. But I was so burnt out with doing woodworking that I did not want to do any more of that. So I was like, well, what else can I do? And I had several friends that were in the tree business in Pensacola, and I'd chat with them, and I told them, like, hey, seems like a cool line of work. You get to run equipment, you get to be outside. I like being outside and doing stuff. Living in Florida, we grew up around hurricanes, and there's trees everywhere. So at some point, you're gonna deal with trees. You're gonna be running a chainsaw or something. So I'd always been around it and thought it was cool, but I started taking it really seriously when this idea of moving to a new area. When we finally did make the move, I did have a friend in this area too that had a tree business, and it was a smaller operation, just and he would climb everything, and he had a bobcat and he had a dump trailer. And so me and him would talk, and I'd work with him, and I just went out and I bought a bobcat and a dump trailer and a piece of junk F350, and I started my tree business. I applied, got my LLC and all that stuff. This was in 2018. And we've been living here in a house we were renting for a couple months, and I ran an ad in the newspaper that said, "We'll cut trees safely." That was how I started my marketing. I figured you'd like that coming from a
I
background.
love that. Yeah, it's always
hard to believe that that's how I got work, was literally from a newspaper ad in 2018. Looking back, the amount of stuff that's happened since then, it feels like that was in the 80s or something.
Yeah, you still running those newspaper ads, killer ROI nowadays?
Yeah.
Or?
I ran it for like 6 months, and I was like, this is doing basically nothing. I did get some work off of them.
It's awesome.
So, I work with my buddy over here, and then I would just do any job I could find. I did some jobs back home. I worked for some friends. I worked for people from our, local congregation, and just slowly started building and growing the business. Got to know some more people and started using Google. I think that was a big step for marketing, as you would probably know. Yeah, it just kind of all started coming together. All my stuff was junk and breaking down constantly, and you had to keep fixing it and keep working and keep learning. It was all about learning back then.
What was like the first big job that you did? The one where you were kind of like in over your head, and how did you navigate through that?
I'll tell you like the first big win first. This was probably 6 or 8 months in, and I had the equipment that I had, and my wife and she would come to work with me. And she worked part-time as a dental assistant, and we literally survived off of her income. I reinvested every penny that I made for the first 2 or 3 years. Just kept rolling it back into the business. We worked for this really nice older lady. Her name was Vicky, and she needed some pine trees cut. And I told her $1,100. So I'd come out and I cut like 5 pine trees for her. And I had to climb 2 of them. And mind you, my only experience climbing was maybe going up 10 or 15 foot and practicing on spikes. And I just would watch YouTube videos, all night and all day. And every chance I got, I'd be watching YouTube videos, fucking Billy Ray or, whoever, just some guy climbing a tree, cutting it out. And I was like, man, that's pretty BA. Like, I want to be like that guy. And my wife's holding the rope, and I climb up and, top out a couple pine trees. And she was running my Bobcat at the time. So I cut everything. We loaded that that trailer up with all the trees, all 5 of them went in that dump trailer. And we hauled out of her job at like maybe 1, 2 o'clock, and she paid me $1,100. And I was like, man, we worked. This is 2018, so $1,100 back then, that's good money. And I was like, and I did it all, just the 2 of us. We did it all by ourselves. We thought that was really cool. So I was like, this could be a business. This could be something. Then from there, it's like, you sell your first $2,000 job. It takes you a day or 2. And then I remember selling my first $5,000 job. And I remember going out, doing the estimate, and then calling my wife as soon as I left, because I closed the job, right then and there. They're like, yeah, come do it. And it actually turned into like a $7,000 job because we added some trees while we were there. Leaving that property and calling my wife, and I was so excited. I was just like, man, I just sold a $5,000 job. And she's like, no way, that's crazy. That was like a month and a half salary, for somebody else. And I was like, yeah, we're going to go knock this thing out. We're going to do it in a couple days. It was a cool moment. And, every time I sold a big job like that or something, I'd always think of ways to like, what could I do to make this faster? What could I do to make this easier on me? And so it was like that job, I went and bought a 661, a bigger chainsaw. We're cutting some pretty big trees. Went into the steel shop. It was John's Lawn Equipment at the time, and I dropped $1,500 or something on a chainsaw and a bar and a couple chains. And I was like, man, that's a bunch of money, but I'm about to make $5,000 with it. So I started to realize what it took to, keep the business moving forward, just keep progressing. So it was a cool moment for sure. Something I want for you.
that is an awesome moment. I think it kind of speaks to like a lot of guys, you start as a tree guy and then you slowly move into that business ownership role and you start thinking about your numbers and what you need to track and what equipment you need to have. Like, is that where that kind of started for you? When was that penultimate moment where you feel like you started to shift from like tree guy to business owner?
That shift came years later. For the first couple of years, like my first year, I think we did 120,000. And one of those jobs at the very end of the year was like a $24,000 forestry mulching job. It was at like enviro waste. It was mulching the side of a big giant landfill, and they had let it go, and there's trees growing all over it, and it was absolutely crazy, and nobody wanted to do the job. And so I went out and quoted it, and the guy was like, "Man, you seem young. Like, you sure you want to do this?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." So we rented a skid steer, and I hired a friend to bring his, and we were sliding down the hill, and just it was crazy. I'm so glad we didn't flip anything.
It's
But
always a bad sign when the client's trying to unsell you on the job. Like, yeah, are
yeah,
you sure?
yeah, I probably underbid it too. It probably
Yeah.
should have been like 40 grand, but whatever, we did it, and it was nuts. But I think those moments, and it's not just the tree business, it's anybody in business, those moments when you take on and take a risk. When I say risk, I'm not saying risk your life. I'm saying when you take on the risk of this not working and you're going to have to figure something else out, and you're going to have to work extra hard, and you're going to have to kind of put yourself out there in a position where you're under the gun. Here I was working for a commercial client, and I was 22 years old, and I really didn't have that much experience in the tree industry, but I bet on myself that I'd figure it out, and we did. We figured it out, and I got paid. And it's just like another thing to put under your belt to take with you on the next step of being in business. You give yourself a couple of years of experience of just being the guy out there, not only finding the work, but also doing it. And you're learning this whole time. So like my first 2, 3 years in business, I was learning how to do tree work. I was learning how to do it, and I was learning how to do it safely, and I was learning how to make money doing it. It probably was like year 4 where I had assembled a pretty decent business. I had my CDL. I got my CDL when I was 23. I got a Grapple truck. I sold my pickup truck. I had a nice pickup truck at that point, a 2003 Chevy 3500, and I literally sold it to buy myself a Grapple truck because I knew that a Grapple truck would make me more money than that pickup truck would. And I bought like a $3,000 gas burner pickup truck just to drive around and do estimates and pull a trailer with. So I had a Grapple truck, and then I bought a lift. It's like every time I would run into an issue on a job or run across a tree that I didn't know if I could get down, I would sell the job, and then I'd find a way to get it done. And if that meant buying a piece of equipment, if that meant renting something or hiring somebody, if I was learning how to cut trees and become better at it, safer practices as far as cutting trees down too. But I was also learning what being a businessman means. About year 3, when I started hiring employees, is when I realized, like, yeah, this is a business now, and I need to start transitioning myself into, primarily sales, and then learning that and nailing that down. And you get better at sales, the more rejections you get. So,
Repetitions.
I began to
Yeah.
get my 500 to 1,000 no's so that I could learn what it took to get a yes. That was a big step for me, was shifting my focus away from the everyday production and into sales. That was probably like year 3 to 4.
Awesome. It's a constant lifelong thing. Like you're always learning there and trying to figure out how you can better set the clients at ease. What's the sweet spot to put your pricing at? Things like that. Yeah, it's a never ending cycle.
Yeah. And two, like it was really important to me for establishing value to set myself apart from my competition. And I might have been a little hard on my competition earlier on. Now it's a little different because I'm competing with companies that are similar to mine. And some of the companies that existed back when I was starting, they've made improvements too. So now, it's harder. It gets harder every year to set yourself apart. But once you start getting a client basis and your name is out there and people see your trucks and people see, it's like we stay ahead of the curve by the equipment that we own. I have 2 grapple saw trucks. I got 115-foot lift. I have one of the tallest lifts in the country as far as, being able to pull it with a 2500 pickup truck. We got the Toypin SJ 115. I just bought a new one too. So,
Gosh.
and there are trees that, yeah, you could climb them, but it's harder and harder to find somebody who wants to climb 120 foot up in a pine tree. There's guys out there that'll do it, but it's a lot easier to just push a button and take a ride up an elevator, and start cutting.
You think having the right equipment, how's that really changed the business or transformed it over the last couple of years compared to where you started?
That's a really good question. And I think that in the tree industry, which is different from a lot of industries, the equipment is probably more important than, now I'm not saying people aren't important, but it's probably the most important aspect of your company, because you could have all the guys in the world and all the skill in the world. I don't want to discredit climbers because we don't do a whole lot of climbing, but there's places in other parts of the country and other parts of the world where that's all they do. So I mean, and they have to because of access or whatever. But at least for my limited viewpoint of the industry from the market that I'm familiar with, it's a lot has to do with the equipment that you own and the equipment that you have access to. And you might not even own it. For several years I didn't own a grapple saw truck, but I would hire them. I was very quick to hire a grapple saw operator to come in and help us with a project that was either too difficult or dangerous or just be faster. We hired a grapple saw to come in one time for a trailer park that we were working in, and it was 22 pine trees that we were cutting down, and the grapple saw came out and cut 18 of them in one day. So, and see, to me, like was a business move, versus I could have spent a month out there and cut every single one of those trees down. Yeah, I would have saved myself whatever I paid that grapple truck operator, which was like $4 or $5 grand, which sounds like a lot of money, but coming out of $22,000 to get the job, like marginal. It was marginal. So
100%. It's interesting. You probably catch some heat for that too, like equipment over people, or is it the process? Like, what's the most important? Obviously, marketing, right, is number one. Kidding, but
I will say this, because that is a good point. It's hard to say anything's more important than anything else in business, because at the end of the day, we work for people, and the equipment's got to be run by people. So people are always going to be the most important aspect of a business, because you don't have a business if you don't have people involved with the company. But at some point, you could just be a guy. There was a guy around here years ago known as the Florida Beaver, and he drove around in a minivan and just cut trees for people. And he would literally tell them that for $100, by the way. So it was like any tree, $100. He said, all I do is cut it and put it on the ground, and I offer no guarantees as far as where this tree's gonna go. I'll cut it. And people would hire him left and right, But it's like, what do you do if somebody comes out and cuts a tree like that, and it lands on your house? This guy's jumping in this minivan and leaving. So at some point, you wanna, that's where I say establishing value is, hey, we're a company that we're dedicated to doing good work for people. And because we're dedicated to working for people and for our employees to be safe, that's why we possess the equipment that we do. We're not cutting corners on safety. We're not cutting corners on efficiency. And we want to be like the tip of the spear as far as using state-of-the-art equipment. Whatever's available to the industry, that's the highest level of equipment, we're going to own that. We're going to have that equipment. And that's what you get for hiring us. You're being given this rare opportunity to see a grapple saw. Like, you can't go down to Home Depot and rent a grapple saw.
right.
And I tell my customers, back when I was doing a lot of selling, we invite everybody to pull up a lawn chair and watch us put on a show. We're entertainment and tree removal. So
I love that.
we like to be watched because we think it's pretty cool. What we do is pretty cool.
It's
So,
cool. It's cool. Like you have the kids when they do the big projects, they come out and do like the clearance line trimming and things in the neighborhood. You'll actually see the kids come up and they will pull out the chair, or you'll see them peeking out the window, and they'll be watching the cranes for hours, just kind of
oh
move.
yeah, I
It's
mean
really
that's how
cool.
I was when I was a kid, and I would, that's the I literally my mom, she would say, "Oh, look, there's a big tractor over there." And I was just, my face was to the window. Like my I mean, I just wanted to see equipment and planes and cars and cranes and all that stuff. So, and I think every guy especially, but everyone is really impressed with where, technology and equipment has gone with the work that we do.
How do you determine, a big burning question for me with this is, and I know a lot of guys get themselves into trouble with equipment, right? Like you go to the shows and we do get really excited about this stuff. You want to get the grapple saw, you want to get a big bucket, like skid steer, a bigger chipper. What are you using as like your guiding principle to determine when is the right time to buy this equipment? When should I wait? When do I rent? Like, how do you think about that in your business philosophy?
So this is super critical as a business owner because, and this is why I say at some point you have to move as a bit. If you own a tree company, you have to segue from the guy cutting trees to the business owner. And I say that the quickest route to do that is to have a extremely skilled accountant and bookkeeper,
Mm,
because you need to know where you're at with your numbers better than anyone. And you need to be able to know if you make a decision on a piece of equipment or something, you need to know what you need to be generating with it. So some of that comes naturally with the progression of a company. You get in your second or third year. As somebody that is a business owner hearing this would make sense to them. But there's a reason why banks don't just throw money at a company that's got a year or 2 years of revenue. Like they want to see 4 or 5 years of significant deposits going into your account. They want to see cash flow.
cash flow. Yeah.
Well, so if you're thinking about getting a grapple saw or something, you need to be really honest with yourself. And there's nothing more honest than your boss, really. So if you're trying to pull out a loan for something, if you're trying to get that next piece of equipment, whether it's a lift, now I have talked to a lot of guys that are, a little younger than me or a little newer to the tree business, and I've gotten to see some guys progress really well, which is really cool, and I want to see more of that. I want to see guys, grow in the business and reach some of the goals that I set for myself, and maybe even surpass me. I think that'd be really cool. But I've talked to them and said like, well, where are you at? What are your numbers? You ain't got to tell me everything, but like, where are your sales at? Are you at a 20 to 30% profit margin? Like, are you making money? Um, if you're not, why not? Like, can you sell more? Are your prices too low? If you're selling 80, 90% of the jobs that you look at, chances are like you have room in your market for a considerable raise in your prices. Like you're low. You're so, focus on the small things. Get your systems running really smooth with what you do have. Like if you got a bucket truck and a skid steer, and like get to where you're really profitable with that stuff, then decide to make the move. And I think that we're getting into a new market and a new level for the industry. Like when I got into it, grapple saws were a very new thing. And I was very fortunate that I had somebody close by that would come out and rent a truck to me. Not everybody had that. There's probably like 4 or 5 in the whole country. Now there's like 4 or 5. I have two, and there's another guy in town that's got one. There's another guy in. There's probably 6 or 7 within a 80-mile radius of me.
Wow.
So, in a very short period of time, we're talking like 7 or 8 years. So there's gonna be grapple saws available. I would rent one, not saying I would come out and operate for somebody if they wanted me to come out. And I do that for some of the companies here locally. Occasionally they'll have me come out and cut something for them. My mom always told me like rent, borrow as much as you possibly can until you absolutely have to buy something. And
Mm,
she told me a story how my dad would go borrow a wheelbarrow from the neighbor. And growing up, it's like, just borrow a wheelbarrow. You don't need it. You need to buy one. And then finally, we moved, and he had to go buy a wheelbarrow. And he was like 35 years old and had owned 3 or 4 houses, and he finally had to go buy himself a
Taking that to
wheelbarrow.
the extreme, I guess, but
Yeah. So yeah, which we didn't have a whole lot of money growing up. So
sure.
if you have that mindset of like, well, I need to get all this stuff going really, really smooth and be prepared for the additional expenses, because somebody could be looking at buying a lift or buying a grapple saw or buying a grapple truck. They might think to themselves, oh, well, we're talking a, 2 or 3 grand. Well, it's like, you got insurance. There's another $1,000 or whatever. I mean, insurance on my grapple saw was, when I bought it, was like $1,000 a month. I mean, that's another huge expense.
I love what your dad said, because it's a really good first principle to have. You know what I mean? You borrow until you have to buy. Because a lot of guys come into business and they think about maximization of profits. But like, what's often a more powerful lever for guys is minimization of risk, right? Like once you buy that piece of equipment, you have to carry that note. And marketing trends come and go. Things are seasonally, like maybe direct mail was feeding your business last year and all of a sudden it doesn't work this year. What are you going to do, right? If you have to carry that note versus you're borrowing the equipment or you're renting it on an as needed basis. Sure, you're not making as much money, but you don't have as much that you have to carry with you. There's smart growth and then there's growth for growth's sake. And I think smart growth is the best way to approach it. Like, to your point, we had a story here, partner in the Midwest, and we really, marketing guy diving into the books, but it's like, hey, are we still making money when we're running Google ads during this winter period? Demand has dried up, costs are kind of remaining relatively the same. Like, are we still making money? And we went to the books and we looked at the previous year and we said, okay, in the winter month, demand slowed down. So we had to spend more money on ads to get the same volume of jobs for the crew. We had to discount our jobs because everybody else in the market started to kind of drop their pants because they wanted to stay working through the winter. They hadn't really prepared for it. Plus it gets cold, so the efficiency of the guys is a lot lower. So we're not getting the jobs done as quickly as we normally would be. So we're spending more on marketing. Our pricing is lower, so we have less profit in every job, and our efficiency is lower. And we went to the books and we're like, every month that we operated here in 2024, we were losing 5% on every job on net we did.
Wow.
Like, if we had just shut down and not worked at all, we would have had a 20 to 25% like net profit margin rather than the 10 to, or 12, I think, percent is what he kind of clocked in at. And just take a vacation, right? Like 3 months of completely wasted effort, because what bites you is not knowing those numbers, to your point.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And that's kind of the point that I'm really was getting at. Is it's like, buy a grapple saw when you're ready for one. We had like 6-8 weeks of backlog when I bought my truck. And I called BIK and I was like, what truck is on your yard complete right now? And they're like, I think we have a TC70. And I was like, send it. And so they're like, okay. Plus you have repairs. You have maintenance. And every piece of equipment you buy has more maintenance. And even for someone like us, we're a company that does over $1 million, over $1.5 million a year, maybe even more than that. And just to get a perspective of what size company we are, at one point we had 10 employees. We've kind of slimmed down a little bit since 2024 and 2025 being crazy years with hurricanes. And there's times where we're just overwhelmed by equipment maintenance and equipment breakdowns. And like right now, I have my Yanmar articulating loader, which we absolutely love and we use like constantly. And it's in the shop. It's probably gonna be in the shop another 6-8 weeks, waiting on a valve from Japan. So, it's stuff like that, and that it's gonna be there. You're gonna have to deal with it at some point. Your most reliable machine is gonna let you down. That's just how it goes.
Amen.
So, and when it really hits you is when it's like all 7 or 8 pieces of equipment you own and like 6 of them.
It's all gonna go at once, right? Murphy's Law. Whatever can happen.
Yeah. But it's an adventure. You're just constantly learning what it takes to run a business, and that's something that so many people don't understand.
Really, really sound advice there. I do want to. We're here for the ATCP, so
Right.
it'd be a crime if I didn't ask you the question: why ATCP? Why did you join? What did the story look like there? And now you're also a volunteer member, heading up the membership committee here. What was the journey there, and why do you think it's so important for the organization to exist?
I am a big advocate for the idea of collaboration over competition. And obviously, everyone's local area, you're going to have competitors, and that's okay. I mean, there's a lot of different options for buying a pickup truck. You know, you might drive a Chevy, I might drive a GMC, somebody else drives a Ford, somebody drives a Dodge. At the end of the day, they provide the same thing, but there's a market for all of them. So I like the idea of seeing our industry continue to advance in ways that, unfortunately, it seems like no matter how much equipment is available, there's still people taking too many risks. There's too many accidents, there's too many deaths, there's too many near misses. And it's like, why is it that every time we get on our phones and we want to do a little doom scrolling on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, it's always videos of trees hitting somebody's house or somebody falling out of a tree or somebody just doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. My thought is you have the ISA, you have the TCIA. I'm members with the ISA. I'm a certified arborist. I love the ISA, but I feel like their main focus is tree healthcare, like plant healthcare. There's some involvement with climbing and all that stuff, pruning, whatever. But why not have an association that's really dedicated to helping, you know, tree guys? People like us that are business owners or work for a tree company, a larger tree company, but people that are out there every day doing the work and running the equipment, and maybe the guys that are trying to grow a business. If there's an opportunity for me to help somebody and to keep them from hurting themselves or getting themselves in a bad situation where they damage someone's property, it's like, let us help you. So that was probably the biggest appeal for me, is being some part of something that's a little bigger than me, being able to kind of push the idea of working safely, growing your company alongside your compadres. I don't know what
Right.
else it like. We can all do this work and be friends, and then we'll work together. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about renting equipment. If I had more opportunities to have done that, I feel like I could have done even better, as I was growing a business. And I've on some of our Facebook groups, and I keep up with all that stuff as best as I can. I try to encourage people that are growing their business, like, work with the guys around you that have a crane. Like, instead of selling a job cheap so that you can do it and keep all the money, like, don't get greedy. Just sell the job for what it's worth and hire somebody that has a crane to help you. You would literally walk away with more money. So I like to see the industry get safer. I'd like to see the industry make more money. I'd like to see people, business owners, there's so many guys that have been in this 30, 40 years, and all they have to show for it is a bucket truck that's like 30 years old, and it's like, oh, it's paid
So
off,
true.
but it breaks down every day.
Yeah.
And nobody should even go up in it because it's not safe. It's like hydraulic fluid and the fiberglass is falling apart. So it's like, why not work where you can grow your business to the point where you have employees and your employees are working safely and you actually have systems in place and you have all the safety gear. I wonder sometimes if these guys that are out there making these videos, and maybe their videos are cool and they're doing some cool stuff and they're really good at what they do, but they don't have a hard hat on. They got a baseball cap on backwards and no shirt on. And it's just like, it's like, dude, you're not setting a good example for, maybe your son or your nephew or something that wants to get in the tree business. Like, I have a lot of respect for people that do tree work because it's not easy. It's hard work. It's super dangerous. It's super difficult. So why not at least try to do it safely and do it smart and get to the point where you're not having to just, grind till you're 70 years old. That's kind of the big appeal for me. And the other thing too is that you got to keep yourself, no matter how big your business is or how good your business is doing, it can always do better.
Mm.
So even though we're, firing on all cylinders and we've had some really good years and we're profitable, I know that I'm going to learn more from the guys that I am in this association with. There's some guys that have so much experience and so much knowledge. And, we're talking about Joe Whitledge and Mark Goodpasture and so the guys that have they've seen it all. And even just the short time that we've been in the committees, I've learned all kinds of stuff from you about marketing. At the end of the day, if you don't have any work, you don't have a business. So, that's a huge aspect of the industry that I think is completely overlooked. A lot of guys, when I was in business first starting, they're just like, oh, it's just word of mouth, word of mouth. That's the only way they would get business. And it's like, man, that's not, I'm not discrediting word of mouth. It is very important, but it's like, you've got to have somebody to talk about you. So you
Yeah.
got to go out and acquire clients. And the only way to do that is actively, and aggressively to
Yep.
get in front of people. I want to be a part of new marketing ideas, new strategies, and I'd like to see, 5 years from now, the industry go to a whole other level where the videos that you see on TikTok and Instagram are just nothing but awesome, safe operators, doing their job and they're making the money that they should make. And we're all getting to go home and spend time with our family, and we can go on vacation if we want to. And, you can buy a nice truck and afford it and buy nice equipment, and your guys are using nice, safe equipment. That's what I want to see.
Couldn't agree more. The mentorship and just education needed in the industry is there's such a huge need. It's a problem when your marketing guy has to hit you back and be like, hey, you can't use that guy topping that tree one-handed with the chainsaw on your marketing collateral. That's not really a good look. If your marketing firm's coming back with you, you got some issues. So the mentorship is obviously a huge component of it, and I love that you said that. How important to you do you feel like we talk a lot about regulations and standards too? So mentorship is obviously the like servant leader approach, like kind of leading them to water. How important is it for us to also establish regulation or standards in the industry to kind of force these best practices as well?
Regulation has like kind of a dirty connotation with government, over
Yeah.
what.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily like the word regulation, but unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of words to replace it with. I think that it's super important, and I'll give you an example. If anybody can go out today and start a tree business and buy a crane that's not certified, that let's just say they bought one off of Facebook Marketplace, whatever amount, and they can, the same day that they started the business, bought a crane, they can go out and shackle off a 5,000-pound piece of wood and then swing it over your home. And they've never operated that machine. They've never cut a tree, and they had no requirements to get any licensing or anything. I think that that's just ridiculous, because the person that built your home, they had to become a builder. They had to become a contractor. The person that installed your air conditioning, the person that installed your electrical, the person that did all this, that put your roof on your home. So when that crane fails and destroys your home, a bunch of licensed contractors have to come out and fix it. But you didn't need any licensing. Wing a 5,000-pound piece of wood over somebody's home. So, and there's people that aren't licensed and aren't a certified arborist, and yeah, you could say you have a business license because you started an LLC and you got set up with the county or something, or the city. Sure. But the point that I'm making is that we run incredibly high risk, high liability companies. The barriers for entry for a tree business are only increasing, which you would think is a good thing, but there's still the guy out there that is just starting out and just running a bucket truck and just running a dump trailer or skid steer. If there was some type of requirements that, hey, you do need to be certified crane operator, or you do need to be a certified arborist to, quote, a removal for this tree and to receive a permit or whatever. I'm not trying to prevent the guy that's just starting up from making money. Make money. Go do what you can do that's feasible for you to do. Refer out stuff that's too difficult for you or too dangerous for you. Refer it to somebody else that's also in the ATCP, that's also a licensed contractor that does tree work, and make a percentage. Get a finder's fee. I would like to see more regulation, because if there's some like walls some barriers that would protect people from really putting themselves in a position that they should never put themselves into. These mishaps and stuff that I've been talking about. I'm not trying to give anybody a hard time. Like, everybody's just trying to make a living. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular, but it's like there's no excuse for some of this stuff. It's like, I'm just gonna cowboy up and do it and figure it out. And if it goes wrong, then whatever. But I don't think you realize that if you're doing it to yourself, you could kill yourself, and you're creating a really bad reputation if you're ever gonna try to run a business. If you've dropped a tree on somebody's home to try to recover from that, most people, it would immediately put you out of business. Why not have some barriers in place, some requirements in place at some point in the future, so that people are taking this risk? They're not getting into the tree business and trying to go from just being a guy starting out to doing things that they know they shouldn't be doing. And we've all done it. I mean, we've sold jobs, and we've, gotten 3/4 of the way done or something, and just like, I don't know what I'm going to do next. But I feel like if there's a little more structure to the industry, how many guys that build homes, it's like they hire a crane operator to come set the trusses. If you don't have a crane, hire somebody. Hire somebody to do that part of the job. Do what you can. It's like, I got a bucket truck, I can reach 60 foot up. I cut all the limbs that I could reach. Can you come do the rest of the job? And I think that in the future, we start growing the ATCP. I think it'd be really cool to be able to just get on the phone and say, hey, I'm in a bind. I'm a new tree guy, and I'm part of the ATCP, and I'm in a little bit of a bind. This is where I'm at. Well, hey, we got a guy over here that's got a frame, and we got another guy that's got a grapple truck. We're gonna come out and help you out. We want to make some money. We want to make a little money. And maybe then that's where the real coaching can come in. If you look at a job that 3 people go out and quote, and one quotes 10 grand, one quotes 12 grand, and then somebody gets the job for 4, what was the real value of the tree? It's the real value of the tree is what the market can bear. And it's not saying that the guy that was 10 grand was trying to rip the customer off. The guy at 10 grand, maybe he was accounting for the crane. He was accounting for his guys being certified operators. He was accounting for the fuel. He's accounting for all these things. Meanwhile, the guy that sold for $4,000, he doesn't have any of that equipment. They're just going to climb it, and they're just going to rig it down. It's going to take them 3 or 4 days, and they're going to make a bunch of risks in some of their cuts or something. My thinking is, if you're the guy that sold that job for $4,000, let's coach you to the point where you know that tree is valued for more than that. Sell it for 10, sell it for 12, and then hire the guy that was there quoting it for 10, and have him do the crane part. Yep. Now you're making 2-3 grand, and you don't even have to lift a finger. Be a businessman. Like, don't be a tree guy only. Be a businessman.
Another powerful thing you captured there too is like you need to borrow the knowledge and expertise. Like, there's only so much that you can learn in the classroom and not out in the field. If that's true, then how do you learn to operate the grapple saw correctly? How do you capture all of the nuance that you don't know without taking on all of the risk of just, well, I'll make a mistake and fail through it? Like, that's not really an option in a lot of the work that happens in the tree care industry. It's not about just borrowing the equipment to mitigate your financial risk, but you also need somebody to teach you and mentor you on best practices and how to operate safely for when it's time for you to actually acquire that big piece of equipment as well, right?
So yeah, 100%. And just to run off of that too, when I train people that we hire to run equipment, I tell them that to become a good operator, you have to watch somebody that's good run this machine for a while. You just need to watch them for hours and hours and hours, and just note how they're running it, which function does what, and some tips and tricks. You need to just watch them and ask them questions. So if you're thinking about buying a grapple saw, go watch somebody that owns one. Go hire somebody that owns one. Have them come out, see how it flows with your work. I know for a while there's some guys online that were leasing them, like lease options with an operator, without an operator. You had to insure. Maybe that's an option. Get set up with somebody. If you got a bunch of work coming in, your busiest season of the year, rent one, borrow one. Hire somebody that's got one. But yeah, and that goes for every aspect of the business too. Like, I think that there's things that maybe you should keep to yourself, as far as, you want to be careful not to just be going around telling everybody your numbers. Oh, I'm making this, I'm making that off of the job. Like, we sometimes when you're younger and then you're newer in business, it's like you're so excited that you sold a job. You're excited that you have work. You're excited that you're making money, and those things are great. But the focus needs to be on, how can I keep improving? How can I take this to the next level, make this into something that's going to continuously generate revenue, that's going to keep cash flow going.
Absolutely. Brazzi, you've been very generous with your time today too, so I want to keep you here just a few more minutes. Got the lightning round for you. So a few fun questions. Coffee or energy drinks? What's your poison?
Oh, I'm a 1 cup of coffee in the morning, and then just lots and lots of water.
Lots of
Gatorade.
water.
So I'm not a big fan of energy drinks.
You
I
gotta
will
stay.
real quick though. I had a guy that worked for me, and I'm not even kidding. He drank 5 monsters a day. And I've told him several times, it's like, dude, this is not good, man. You're gonna give yourself a heart attack. At least 4 or 5 a day. Not to mention this vaping all day long. I was like, dude, the amount of stimulants that's in your system right now, I can't even imagine. Like, he was a really hard worker. I will say that.
Kept him going. I don't know how you stay hydrated down in the Florida heat doing that, but
I don't recommend it at all, but he worked hard.
All right. Biggest pet peeve in the industry.
Oh, this is I'm gonna get some crap for this, but not wearing a hard hat.
Not wearing the hard hat.
Like, every time I see it, man, it just, oh my gosh, makes me cringe. And chaps and a harness, up in the bucket, like all that stuff. To me, I feel naked without it. If you need to get to the point where you feel naked and ashamed if you don't have that stuff on, I don't care how much experience you have.
I love that. Chainsaw brand of choice.
Man, it's tough. It's got to be steel, and it's got to be 500i. I own like 9 of them, but I will say I have run Huskies, and I had some 395s that were just absolutely ludicrous. I mean, that saw is so fast. I love that saw, but they just don't hold up. Maybe we're hard on stuff. I mean, I know we are. I got rid of them because they were in the shop constantly. And I had to wait for parts for a really long time during COVID. It was ridiculous. I waited like 6-8 months for a choke valve or something for one of their saws. So I just went and bought another 500i while I was waiting for it. So
old and reliable, right? I think a key point of the equipment is it has to be ready for the job when you need it, right?
Yeah, we could talk for hours about that, about dealers and all that stuff. But yeah, it's got to be ready to cut.
Final question for you. What is the best piece of advice you can impart on the younger guys starting out? I know you've shared a lot of knowledge today, so thank you for that. But your best single piece of advice for any guy who's just getting started out in the tree care industry?
Don't risk your life. I mean, at the end of the day, there's no job, there's no tree, there's no situation that's worth your life. So the best advice I could give you is to work safely, to slow down, and to learn as much as you possibly can. If you're gonna take a risk, take a bet on yourself that if you put in the work, you'll succeed. Don't risk your butt up in a tree. It's not worth it.
Great advice. Brazzi, thank you so much today, brother. Appreciate your time and hopping on with us. Really looking forward to continuing the work on the membership committee with you and big things to come.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.